Today is Vav Cheshvan, the 6th day of the month of Cheshvan. Tomorrow is Zayin Cheshvan, the 7th day of the month of Cheshvan. Now, what I do with you is what's called Yom HaDepagra. Yom HaDepagra officially means special days. And when we don't have Yom HaDepagra, we do questions and answers, as you know. Zayin Cheshvan is a day that the Rebbe made into a Yom Tov. It's not really a Yom Tov, it's just a day. In Eretz Yisroel, tonight they will say V'sein Talamot L'Brach. They ask for rain tonight. We don't ask for rain for another like 6 weeks, till the middle of December, the beginning of December. Now we're still holding the end of October. 5 weeks. The Rebbe has a whole bunch of days that he sort of created. He didn't create any of them because all of them are either in the Gemara or in the Shulchan Aruch. But the Rebbe took days that people just said, okay. And the Rebbe said, what do you mean, okay? Let's make something out of it. I'll give you a list, okay? Zayin Cheshvan, Chamish Asar B'Shvat, Purim Cotton, Pesach Sheni, Lag BaOmer, Yud Beis Sivan, and Chamish Asar B'Yov. Those are 7 days in the calendar that all of them are written in the Gemara. Some of them are actually written in Chumash. And one of them is, of course, written in Zohar. No one makes anything out of it. And the Rebbe made such a big deal out of it. In my years, I was a bach in the 80s. On all of these days was a Fabrengen. Zayin Cheshvan was a Fabrengen. Yud Beis Sivan was a Fabrengen. Chamish Asar B'Yov was a Fabrengen. Chamish Asar B'Shvat was a Fabrengen. The Rebbe had this way of taking something that's written in the Torah and pressing on it and pressing on the nerve until a flower grew out of a seed, you know. And of all the 7 days that I just mentioned, probably Zayin Cheshvan is the least sensible. Chamish Asar B'Yov, you know what it is, right? The Gemara speaks, the Mishnah speaks about it, the Gemara speaks about it. Chamish Asar B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, right? It's a big deal. Pesach Sheni is in the Chumash, Purim Cotton, Lag BaOmer. But the other two, Yud Beis Sivan and Zayin Cheshvan, are really, like, what are they? What's Yud Beis Sivan? Yud Beis Sivan is the last day that you don't say Tachlin after Shavuos. That's what it is. Because when you go to the Beis HaMikdash, you have to bring a carbon. If you can't do it on the first day, bring it on the second day. If you can't do it on the second day, bring it on the third day. Now Pesach has 7 days, so you don't do it the first day Pesach. Every person who comes Aliyah L'Regel has to bring 3 karbanas, 2 or 3 karbanas, 2 for sure. Eilas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga, and maybe also a Shalmei Simcha. So everybody came, and even though women have no chiyuv to be L'Regel, but they have a chiyuv of Simchas Yom Tov, so they came in the family, and you spent the night, and you went home. That way, you didn't have to stay for the whole Pesach. Came for 1 day of Pesach, did your thing, and you went home. And you didn't have to come the first day. I guess Pesach had to be there for Erev Pesach. Carbon Pesach says, Mr. say the Reis. But Sukkot, you came for 1 day, you spent the night, you went home. But Shavuos is only 1 day. And for many reasons, it's impossible for all the Jews in the world to bring their karbanos in 1 day. So just like Pesach is 7 days, and Sukkot is 7 days, Shavuos is 7 days. The Yom Tov is 1 day, but the 6 days after are considered Yemei Tashlum, make-up days. So the halacha is that we do not say Tachlin until Yud Beis Sivan. So the Rebbe decided that Shavuos finishes Yud Beis Sivan. You understand? Shavuos became a 7-day Yom Tov in the world of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he would fabreng every year in Yud Beis Sivan, every year, many years in Yud Beis Sivan. It was a big deal. Zayin Cheshvan is even more remote. What's Zayin Cheshvan? Zayin Cheshvan is as follows. Israel is not a land that has good irrigation. Eretz Yisroel is a land where there's not enough water for agriculture, which means they're very dependent on rain, much more than most places. Now, Eretz Yisroel is surrounded by water. To the east of Eretz Yisroel, you have the Yarden, the Jordan River. To the west of Eretz Yisroel, you have the Mediterranean Sea. But first of all, salt water is not exactly good for irrigation. And second of all, the Yarden is a hiccup of a river. Yarden is not exactly the Mississippi, you understand. It's barely there. So Eretz Yisroel has a water shortage. Eretz Yisroel can very easily become a desert. And the reason Eretz Yisroel survives is because there's rain and mountains. If you have no river and you have no mountains, you have desert. It's very simple. Go to any place in the world which is very flat, it'll either have a river close enough that keeps the earth, the soil moist and so on, or you'll have mountains. The mountains will hold the clouds and they will cause rain. That's why mountain ranges are so important, right? In America you have the Rockies, you have the Adirondacks. These mountains are very, very important. You take those mountains out of America, huge parts of America become like the center of America, which is very flat, and there's a very big problem with agriculture because there's no rain. But we have the Mississippi that cuts straight to America from Canada until the Gulf, and it irrigates the states on both sides of the river. In Africa, for example, where they only have one mountain range in the very east of Africa, and they don't have enough rivers, much of it is desert. Israel is situated so close to water, but it doesn't have enough. So it needs rain. And the mountains grab the clouds and they cause it to rain. Because of this, Eretz Yisroel's irrigation needs are much more sensitive. In Israel, water is a big deal. In New York, water is not a big deal. It's just not. We have the what's it called? The Hudson River that runs from the north of the state all out into the Atlantic Ocean that provides us with plenty of water. Maybe the water is not so clean, but there's plenty of water. And it keeps the grass green, of course, when you have water. Clouds go up and it rains. Eretz Yisroel is a very sensitive place when it comes to water. Which is why the Metiyas Advarim is that in Eretz Yisroel, when there's no rain, there goes a tinus. When Israel doesn't have rain, they fast. There's a Masechta in Shas called tinus. There's a tractate in the Gemara called tinus. Tinus talks about fasts. It's 30 daf of Gemara. It's 30 pages, 29 pages of Gemara. Now ask the average person on the street, unless they haven't learned Masechta Tinus, what is Masechta Tinus about? About fasts. Which fast? Well, Tisha B'Av, Shivas B'Tammuz, right? Nope. All the fasts that you know are in a couple of pages. Most of Masechta Tinus is about fasting for rain. Because in general, when there's not enough water, you fast. And in Israel, there's many as like 13 fasts. 3 fasts and 3 fasts more, and then 3 fasts after that, and then 7 fasts, and then 3 fasts after that. The last 7 fasts are like Yom Kippur. You have to fast day and night. Women who are pregnant have to fast. It gets very serious. Because if there's no rain in Israel, there's a drought, there's hunger, there's just essen. Food, Pashat food. So Eretz Yisroel is extremely dependent upon the rain. Parenthetically, this is a Maimon Amuzke, but this is a good parenthesis. There's a beautiful, the Rebbe spoke about this. There's a Chassidus to this. There's a Chassidus to this. What's the Chassidus of this? They came from Mitzrayim and they went to Canaan, right? The Jews were living, they were enslaved in Egypt. Like we learned in Chumash this week, we're going to learn in Mitzvah Hashem. They were slaves in Egypt and they went to Canaan. What's the difference between Egypt and Eretz Yisroel? Egypt is a land that has one of the largest rivers in the world. It's called the river the Nile, the Nilus. And it runs from south to north. It runs into the Mediterranean. It's a very, very large river with an enormous volume of water. And for reasons that are hard to explain, and besides for bringing water, it also brings fertilizer. And in Egypt, they have what's called the annual flood. The waters of the river flow over to the sides. And when the waters withdraw, they leave not just water behind, but fresh, fertile earth, which is why Egypt, even though it's in Africa, is a very fertile country. It always has been. The success of the ancient Egyptian kingdom, ancient Egyptian culture, was because of the river the Nile. And Yid lived in Egypt, there was always water. Then the Abishah takes them out of Mitzrayim, puts them in Eretz Canaan. And it's considered an upgrade. It's considered a better land. Rashi says in Chumash that the worst terrain in Canaan is called Chevrein. That's why it's a place for cemetery, for burying people. The best terrain in Eretz Mitzrayim is Goshen, and Chevrein is more fertile than Goshen. I think I'm saying it correctly. It's weird. The difference, however, is the waters of Egypt are basically predictable. And I say basically because some years there's no flood. You know how it was in Egypt, right? The king was a god. The king was a god. And the king got up on a rock and he said, yabba dabba dub, and the flood came. The flood was going to come, whether he got up on a rock or didn't get up on a rock, but this was the culture. If the flood didn't come, they would kill the king. They would kill him. Why? You didn't make it water the river. The rivers came by themselves, but this was the whole culture. In Eretz Yisroel, you have to have mountains and clouds and rain. So it says in Chassidus, as in the Rebbe Sichas, that in Mitzrayim, you want Parnassa, you look down. In Eretz Yisroel, you want Parnassa, you look up. In other words, even the Parnassa in Mitzrayim makes you forget the Eibishter. Tava is taking care of you. Nature is taking care of you. You don't need Hashem's help, in quotations. We're doing just fine. And that's why Egypt is a land of idolatry, of Avodah Zarah. In Eretz Yisroel, you are very dependent upon clouds and rain. And clouds and rain are very unpredictable. So you got to pray. If David's Meibishter, when you need water in Eretz Yisroel, you look to the heavens. So the Rebbe explains that the physical topography, the land of Eretz Yisroel, by its nature, makes you look to the Eibishter. As opposed to the physical topography of Egypt, it makes you look away from the Eibishter. And it's a shtickle musar, it's an explanation, it's a dvatera about why Eretz Yisroel is the holy land, because the nature of the land makes you look to the heavens. Here's the deal, however. How much rain you get determines how lush Eretz Yisroel is going to be. So this is the story. It actually says it in Chumash. It's also a historic fact. It's an undeniably historic fact. As soon as the Yidden are kicked out of Eretz Yisroel becomes desert. For thousands of years, they called themselves Palestinians, and we call them pains in the neck, have been living in Eretz Yisroel. It was a desert, there's no food. The population was very low, their standard of living is very low. Yidden come back to Eretz Yisroel, Mitamol becomes a garden. Now, of course, you tell that to the Zionists, they'll be very insulted. What do you mean? We made the desert bloom. We put in the irrigation systems and we desalinated the salt water, which is all true. But before Zionis, it was also true. When Yidden came back to Eretz Yisroel became a garden. There's a Gemara that talks about how fertile a land Eretz Yisroel used to be. In the end of Masechta Ksubis, if you're a Zionist, you have to know the last few pages of Ksubis, okay? That's the Zionist Gemara, the end of Masechta Ksubis. The Gemara says you pull an apple out of the ground, a potato out of the ground, or whatever, some kind of a tuber, and the space fills with water. The ground was saturated with water, There was so much water. The land was so fertile. That's why you learned in school about how the Meraglim came back with these massive fruits, unusually large specimen of fruits and grapes and so forth, because Eretz Yisroel was extremely, extremely fertile. And it began with rainwater. Rain! But if there's enough rain and it goes to the right places, the land becomes very lush and very rich, becomes a garden, becomes beautiful. So the Chazal say, Rashi explains the Psukim, that when Yidden leave Eretz Yisroel, it becomes a desert. When Yidden come back to Yisroel, it becomes a garden, because this is a holy garden which was given to the holy people. Now, just for the purposes of political correctness, or maybe political incorrectness, let me share something with you. Okay? This week, you're going to have a Maaseh with Sdoim, remember? This week, you're going to have a Maaseh with Sdoim. Tomorrow's Chitas is about the first war. It says in Midrash, the first war in history was this war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Don't tell it to a historian, he'll get a conniptions. But it says in Midrashim, this is the first, there's a record of the first battle. Next week's Sdoim is going to be turned over, destroyed, right? So you know that when the Eibishter turned over Sdoim, he told Avraham Avinu, right? Why did he tell him? So if you're a liberal, you say, well, Hashem should daven for the people of Sdoim, right? And maybe that's true too, but it's not what Rashi says. Rashi says, and listen to this carefully, because the truth of the matter is, it's nish poshet. Rashi says that the reason Hashem told Avraham Avinu is about to overturn Sodom was because of all of Eretz Yisroel, the most beautiful, gardenesque colonies were Sodom and Amorah and Admah and Tzvoyim and Tzayir. They were in the south of Israel, and they were extremely lush. For those of you who've been to Israel, you know the south of Israel is a desert. The Negev is a desert. The fertile parts of Eretz Yisrael are in the north, Naphtali and Yisachar and Zevulun, not Yehuda. Yehuda is in the south. But in the ancient world, in times of Avraham Avinu, the south was more fertile than the north. And Hashem says to Avraham Avinu, I'm about to destroy your real estate, I need your permission. That's what Rashi says. The Eibishter was going to take the most beautiful part of Eretz Yisroel, the most gardenesque, the most fertile, the most moist part of Eretz Yisroel, and turn it into gofris. You know what gofris is? Sulfur. If you go to the south of Israel, I'm not a man of it, but I've looked this up, I've studied this. The mountains in the south of Israel are full of sulfur. Now, as much as people deny that the Torah is true, but some things are very hard to deny. You could see the sulfur, yellow, it's a yellow stone. The sulfur that rained out of the sky when the Eibishter destroyed Sdom and Amorah. So the Eibishter had to tell Avraham Avinu, I'm destroying Sdom and Amorah because he's taking a part of his garden and turning it into a desert, and it's a desert, Adayim Azeh, it's still a desert. So Eretz Yisroel is a country that could be very lush. It could become a desert quite quickly because its source of irrigation is precarious. You understand? Or to say this in different words, let me give you another way to look at this, okay? What's the difference between the solar calendar and the lunar calendar? What's the difference between the Goyish calendar and the Jewish calendar? The combination of the sun and the moon. I'll give you a hint, okay? Why do you call a lunatic a lunatic? Because he's like the moon. He's crazy. They used to say that crazy people go crazy when the moon is full. Lunatic means a meshugana, yeah? It's from the word loon, which means moon in many languages. The moon is seen as irregular. The moon is seen as, I'll explain to you very simply, okay? Muslims, keep a lunar calendar, okay? But they don't do what we do. They don't have a nibba year. They do not have a leap year. So if you keep a strict lunar calendar, every year you lose 11 days. The solar year is 365.25 days. The lunar year is approximately 354 days. There's a difference between 11 days and 6 hours. So if every year you lose 11 days, every 3 years you lose a month. Which is why the Muslim holidays do not have a season. It says in the Chumash that Pesach has to be in the spring and Sukkot has to be in the fall. The only way that can be achieved is by combining the sun and the moon. And we do this by having a leap year. You understand? So now I want you to think about this, okay? Goyim have Yamim Tevim. Lahadl Yidden have Yamim Tevim. Now I don't have time to give you my whole theoretical speech on this, but all Yamim Tevim go back to Adam Rishon. All Yamim Tevim go back to Adam. This is a little bit disturbing when you hear it, okay? I'm going to give you the best example. When we have Chanukah, yeah, the Goyim have Yatzmach and Pekoni, correct? Yatzmach, and then a week later they have Pekoni, correct? Correct, right? You all know what I'm talking about, yeah? Do you know that it says in the Medrash that when Adam Rishon was born, created, and kicked out of Gan Eden, he started to notice that the days were getting shorter, right? He was living in the northern hemisphere. They were getting shorter. So what did the Adam Rishon think? That the sun is going to disappear completely and the world's going to freeze. And he got very nervous. And he couldn't exactly discuss it with the Eibush because the Eibush just kicked him out of Gan Eden for eating from the fruit. And then one day he noticed that the days stopped getting shorter. And the next day he noticed that it's getting a little longer. He made a Yom Tif. It's around January 1st. Mamish. And if you look at the whole calendar, all the holidays that people keep, even Lahadl, Elf, Afadol, and Teda, the Yom Tevim can be traced back to Adam Rishon. They changed. The names changed and the excuses changed. But you look at all the holidays, every nation's holidays at the same time of the year. Most of them, like Pesach and like Shavuos and like Sukkot, and Goyim have a holiday at those seasons as well, has to do with a simple thing, food. Pesach is celebrate the barley, Shavuos is celebrate the wheat, and Sukkot is celebrate the fruit. Goyim have holidays at the same time. They have different names for them, and a lot of them are Avodah Zarah. Okay, but it all goes back to the beginning of time. Here's the difference. The Goyish holidays always occur on the same time. In other words, the Goyish calendar never fluctuates. They have dates. I don't know what the dates are, and it doesn't matter to me what the dates are, but they have holidays at certain seasons. Those holidays mean certain things that have to do with Teva. I gave you the best example of this, I don't know what they call it, the equinox, and then there's the solstice, when the day is the shortest and the day is the longest, when the days are equal. They're always in the same day. They're always on the same day. The Goyish calendar is fixed. They celebrate the harvest, Pesach time, always on the same day. They celebrate the harvest, Shavuos time, always on the same day. But by Yidden, it's sometimes earlier and sometimes later. Why? Because our calendar doesn't follow the sun. It follows the combination of the sun and the moon. The worst thing that can happen to Chalamoid Pesach trips is what? Easter. Because then the guy were going on trips also. There's no room on the, what's it called? The Statue of Liberty. They don't let you on. Too many people. But they can have it early, they can have it later. The difference is not in their calendar, it's in our calendar. Because our calendar isn't fixed, it's variable, it changes. But there's a deep chassidus to it. There's a deep chassidus. What the chassidus is? The Goyish calendar is connected to Teva. Nature. You served Hashem, you didn't serve Hashem, you were a good person, you were a bad person. The seasons are always the same. The Jewish calendar is moody. Sometimes Tishrei is earlier, sometimes Tishrei is later, sometimes Tishrei is in the right time. Why? Because our calendar is a reflection of our avoid. If Yidden serve Hashem better, there's more Parnassa. Yidden don't serve Hashem as well, there's less Parnassa. So the downside is, excuse me, I'd like to live in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, and have the river, the Nile, and have a constant supply of water, right? And now you're supposed to say what? Blah, 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 blah. As they state in Mishnah, right? Yeah? What's the deal? Two things are the deal. The first thing is the deal is a Yidden are different than Goyim. Hashem gives a Goy whether he works or not. But on the other hand, when a Yid serves Hashem, Hashem makes him rich. Hashem gives him more than Teva. So the two nekudas are that by Goyim lahavdil, the calendar is not connected to their avodas Hashem. They're going to get what the Eibush is planning to give them based on Teva alone. And by Yidden, if we misbehave, it gets dry, there's not enough water. And if we're tzaddikim, like it was in the times of the first Beis HaMikdash, and the Gemara speaks about the second Beis HaMikdash, you imagine pulling a potato out of the ground, and the hole fills with water. It was so moist. Whenever you walked around, you were getting your feet wet. You probably had to walk around, I don't know, rubber boots. The land, the sidewalk, if it wasn't cement, was moist. Because the land was full of water. It was a bracha from the Meibish. Because Eretz Yisroel is a holy land. A holy land means it doesn't follow Teva, nature, that nature has rules. It follows the Eibishter and us. If we serve the Eibishter, there's a greater bracha. If we don't serve the Eibishter, Rachmana litzlan, there's a lesser bracha. When it says in Rashi, like I told you before, that the minute the Yidden left Eretz Yisroel, it became a desert. This is an undeniable fact. And the minute the Yidden returned, it became a garden. It's an undeniable fact. Why? Depends who you ask, right? But Torah would say because the Eretz Yisroel is a land which belongs to the Jewish people. And when the Jewish people come there, they bring the bracha with them. But this is conditional on our avodas Hashem. You know the famous Chazal, that a man died, a rich man died. And he said to his son, I want you to know, you know why I'm rich? Because I'm very careful with meiser. You have to give 10% of your crop to the Levi. It's a lot of food you have to give away to the Levi. I'm very careful not to cut corners with meiser. I always give the Levi his full measure. Be careful to give meiser. Like it says in the Chumash, Aser te aser. It's a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. We read it on Yom Tov. So the Chazal say, Asher aser b'shvil shetis asher. You want to be rich? Give the tithe, give meiser, give tzedakah. Then the father dies. The son takes over the estate, and he was giving away 1,000 bushels of grain. He was harvesting 10,000 bushels of grain. He was giving away 1,000. And the guy said, I have to give the Levi so much. This is highway robbery. So he took off a little bit. And the following year, he got a percentage less. He said, I had a bad year. This year, I'm going to give even less. And after a certain number of years, he became the Levi. You understand? What he used to give away was his entire yield. So they came to him and they gave him mazel tov that he graduated to the Madrega of Levi. Because in Eretz Yisroel, the cause and effect, the hashgacha Protis of the Eibishter, and the behavior of a Yid are aligned like a hand and a glove. When Yidden do what the Eibishter wants, the Eibishter does what Yidden wants in a much clearer way than a Chutz La'aretz. You understand? There's a wonderful video that must have come out 20 years ago But this is not a movie, it's an actual event. It was before Shemitah. Israel Shemitah is a very big problem. It's a huge problem. Now, a lot of people, unfortunately, don't keep Shemitah. So you, if you're a frum Jew, you have to know which stores you can literally go buy a pound of bread. Because if the people are not nizid in halachas of shvius, it's also, you're not allowed to eat it. Not even allowed to sell it. Not allowed enough from it. Anyway, it's a group of Yidden who needed wheat from matzah in a shvius year, and the only way they were able to do it is to harvest it extremely, extremely early. So they made a deal with a farmer who wasn't frum, that he should keep shvius, however they do it in Eretz Yisroel. It's very complicated. And they harvested the wheat, not in May or April, but like in February, very early. A day or two after they cleared that field, a bunch of people came out of tunnels from Hamas. They were planning to make a massacre in southern Israel. And the wheat was,
It was the first time they used tunnels, and they discovered it before they were able to.
They came out of the tunnels, and the grass that was supposed to be their cover was gone. Why? Because a Yid was Niz and Shemitah, and they wiped them out. They killed them. It's a beautiful movie to watch, even though it's not a Geschmacka movie. But you saw B'muchesh. You do what the Eibishter wants, and the Eibishter provides you. It was going around. It's a number of years. It's maybe 15 or 20 years ago. But it went around at the time. I would imagine every Shemitah, you'll see it again. You saw clearly, you do the mitzvah, the Eibishter protects you. Anyway, let's get back to the day. Tomorrow, tonight is Beis even. It's Zayin Cheshvan. Israel needs rain right away because they're much more dependent on the rain that comes from the heavens, because the river Jordan is not exactly going to provide them with water. Maybe drinking water, maybe. I know that it still has a lake, an inland sea called the Kinneret, right? The Sea of Galilee. The Kinneret also starts disappearing from time to time. If it gets too low, they worry about running out of water. Eretz Yisroel is one of those countries which has a huge problem with water. And Eretz Yisroel is probably the most, I don't think the word probably belongs. Eretz Yisroel is the most advanced country in the world in producing fresh, drinkable water. They've created all kinds of technologies which a lot of other countries have imitated, beginning with desalination, plus you're taking salt out of the water from the ocean. And now they have a system, which I saw a few years ago, where they literally take water out of the air. They have a mechanical system, not electric, mechanics. You know what mechanics means? No battery. A series of filters, and it literally takes water out of the air. Eretz Yisroel is a country that's developed irrigation technology because they need it. So, in Eretz Yisroel, you need rain right after Sukkot. The truth of the matter is, you should have rain for the first day Sukkot. Because it says in the Mishnah, we're judged for water on Sukkot. From Sukkot you have to have rain. But to ask Hashem for rain when you're sitting in the Sukkah seems like a little bit it's like shooting yourself in the foot. So you wait till after Sukkot. I don't know if you know this. The very beginning of Masechta Tainis, which I mentioned to you about 15 minutes ago, the Masechta Tainis begins with when you start to say Marcheshvan Meimosai, Maskidin, Gevures, Geshamim. And there's three opinions. One of the opinions from the first day Sukkot. And the opinion which we follow is that you ask the last day of Sukkot. Why? Because Siman Klola B'chag, mentioning rain on Sukkot is a curse because you're sitting outside in the Sukkah. But you have to understand there's two separate things. There's Marcheshvan, which is an Ata Gibed, the second Beracha Shmon Esrei. And there's V'sein Talamot Levracha, which is in the 9th Beracha Shmon Esrei. What's the difference? The difference is that the first three Berachas of Shmon Esrei, you're not asking Hashem for things, you're praising Hashem for things that He gives us. Right? How does Shmon Esrei go? You start with praise, you finish with thank you, and in the middle you say gimme. You flatter Him, you say gimme, and then you say thank you. The last three brachas are the thank you, the first three brachas are the flattery, the third brachas in the middle is the gimme. How do you spell gimme? G-I-M-E-E or G-I-M-M-E. Gimme. Yeah, it's machlekes, gimme. But it's for sure one word. That's a zikr. Kula amalei pligi. So Ata Gibed is called Birchas HaShavach. You're not asking Hashem for things, you're simply praising Hashem for what He provides. So Mashev Ruach Omedet HaGeshem is not a request, it's a statement. Hashem makes the wind blow and Hashem makes the rain come. So the Mishnah says you don't even want to mention it. Not only you don't want to ask for rain, you don't even want to mention rain, so you wait till Shmini Atzeres. And in Eretz Yisroel and Shmini Atzeres, they do not sit in the sukkah. We, Lubavitch, sit in the sukkah Shmini Atzeres, which is another whole discussion. So when you're not sitting in the sukkah, you say, Marcheshvan, you mention rain. But then comes V'sein talum matal levracha. You should ask for rain. And asking for rain means, I really mean it now, let's make it rain. So according to the Teva of Eretz Yisroel, you should start saying V'sein talum matal levracha the day after Simchas Torah. Chav Dalet Tishrei, or in Eretz Yisroel, Chav Gimel Tishrei. The day after Simchas Torah, we should ask for rain. But we delay it by 2 weeks. You push it off by 2 weeks. Why? Because Yidden used to come to the Beis HaMikdash with the horses and buggies, or horses without buggies. And they had to go home. And Eretz Yisroel was very large. And for some people, their getting home after Yom Tov was a journey of 2 weeks, 2 weeks in a day. So the Chazal said, no Yid any place in Israel asks for rain until the last Yid gets back to his place. The furthest Jew, and the Rebbe would say, the lowest Jew comes back to his home on the Euphrates, which is like where now is Jordan. L'nahar Protis. So Zayin Cheshvan is a day that tonight in Eretz Yisroel they're going to say V'sein talum matal levracha, and it's probably close to nightfall in Israel now. So in a couple of hours they saw they're going to have a ma'ariv, and in Ma'ariv they're going to say V'sein talum matal levracha. They're going to ask Hashem for rain because they need rain right after Sukkot. So the Rebbe made a decision. And then he made this decision, he began to sell it and sell it and sell it like the Rebbe does, using 1,001 Makoides from Torah. And he created basically a holiday. The decision that Rebbe made is Simchas Torah ends tomorrow. Tishrei, 2-week extension. Literally 2-week extension. Sukkot is 7 days. Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is 2 more days, is 9 days. In Lubavitch Simchas Torah is 20 days. According to Charlie, it's 22 days. The Kater Chodesh, it's 60 days. You guys don't remember Charlie's Mishigas. Remember Charlie's Mishigas? Yeah. Rosh Chodesh is 30 days. Right? So how many days of Hanukkah do you have? 37 days of Hanukkah. Why? Because there's one day. Rosh Chodesh is 30 days. So the day of Rosh Chodesh is 30. 2 days of Rosh Chodesh have 65 days of Hanukkah. And he would walk around saying the 66th day of Hanukkah. I mean, if you know Charlie's Mishigas. Yeah. So if you count Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, you have 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. That's not about 60 days. Okay. If you live in Crown Heights, you know what I'm talking about. Charlie was a good to Mishigan. He was really crazy. And he knew how to drive. He was so good to get under your skin. He went to every Shalom Zocher. Yeah, with the balloons, yeah. When we did Birchas Hachama in 2009, we did Birchas Hachama. I would imagine you don't remember it. So Charlie walked around for months saying, I saw the Son of God. I said, and he knew he knew exactly what he was doing. I saw this, I go argue with him. I blessed the Son of God. It's true, we did bless that. But he knew how to dial our numbers so good. He knew how to make you angry. He was an expert. He said it exactly. The 37 days of Hanukkah. He had Mishigas and Anashir. Anyway, let's get back to the topic. So the Rebbe said, since Jews are still going home, it's still Tishrei. And the thing which is interesting about this, I think is very interesting about it, is that the Rebbe's mood was Tishrei dik. It's hard to describe the Rebbe. You could maybe a little bit see it in the videos. But when the Rebbe was happy, you simply saw it on his face. You saw it in his step. He wasn't happy because he was singing and dancing. His body had an inner joy, which came out in the clapping and the singing. But when the Rebbe walked into a room, you could feel it's Yom Tov. You could feel it's Yom Tov. When the Rebbe introduced this idea of Zayin Cheshvan, which is around 1980, I think, until then it was a nothing day, you know. Tishrei was extended by 2 weeks. And the spirit in 770 was Yom Tov dik. I'll give you 2 practical examples. Number 1, the Rebbe had I told this to you Yom Tov time, the Rebbe had a platform that he stayed on. You know, the platform that's there permanently. The Rebbe didn't like the platform. He hated it, actually. He didn't like the platform at all. He wanted to be on the same level with the people, because halachically, if you're on a platform, it's a shayla if you're part of the minyan. It gets tricky. That's why Rabbi Groner always had to stand on the platform together with the Rebbe, because if somebody else is there, it includes you with the minyan. You're standing alone on the platform, you're separated from the people. So the Rebbe delayed getting the platform. The first time they put up a platform was Tafshin Lamed Aleph, 1973, which is the year of the Yom Kippur War, which happened to be a Shnas Hakel. But the Rebbe made rules that the rules were the platform goes up Erev Rosh Hashanah and comes down Matzah Simchas Torah. Now with the Rebbe you couldn't mess around. If the platform came down a day late, the next day there's no platform. So they would work the night after the Fabrengen, they put up the platform. Right after the Rebbe left the Shul Simchas Torah, that platform came down. They didn't mess around. But the Rebbe you couldn't say, I forgot. There was no such thing as I forgot. They would say to you, forget about it, you know. Eventually, the platform became permanent. But for years, the platform went up and the platform came down. But you couldn't put it up a minute early. The minute the Rebbe started talking about Zayin Cheshvan, the platform stayed for 2 more weeks. Till Zayin Cheshvan was a platform. Motzah Zayin Cheshvan, the platform disappeared. With the same rigidity, with the same exactitude that they used to disappear Motzah Simchas Torah, because now Sukkot is 2 more weeks. And in addition, the Rebbe made a Fabrengen every Shabbos. You know, Simchas Torah could be Friday. You know that, right? If Simchas Torah is Friday, then Shabbos is Pashas Bereishis. That's Chov Dalet, right? So Noach is going to be when? Aleph. So Lech Lecha is going to be like the Zayin Chesish, you know, like almost. So sometimes the Rebbe bring Bereishis and Noach and Lech Lecha still Tishrei. See, for many, many years, the whole Cheshvan was no Fabrengens. And B'derech HaTeva, the Rebbe was recovering. He wanted to give us a chance to catch our breath. Tishrei was so packed. Cheshvan was no Fabrengens. It was a Fabrengen Shabbos of Orcham Cheshvan, and the next Fabrengen was the Orcham Kislev, a whole month, no Fabrengens. The moment the Rebbe made this new holiday, Zayin Cheshvan, until Zayin Cheshvan is Tishrei, Fabrengen every Shabbos. It's Chodesh Tishrei. And the mood was Simchadik, was Mamish Yom Tovdik. The minute Zayin Cheshvan came, it was different. He was withdrawn. It was different. You could feel it. And what's the Yom Tiv? Then Israel, they're asking for rain. Yippee-doo. But by the Rebbe, that's enough of a yippee and enough of a do. You understand? The Rebbe made a Yom Tiv out of an event which is brought in halacha, which is a technicality. The whole thing is a technicality. The ganze Mai is a technicality. And the Rebbe made from it a ganze Yom Tiv. Now, I prepared this Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, but I didn't teach it to you. So you'll either keep them or give them back to me. If you give them back to me, I'll use them on Thursday with Seminary Aleph. Okay.